Okay, hello. My name is Jacek Grymoza, and I'm a senior security architect. In addition, I have been an active board member of ISC Square Chapter Poland for 7 years. In today's presentation, I will tell you how to get started with a threat hunting process based on network data. I will start my presentation by explaining what the threat hunting process is, what methods can be used in the process, and what data sources should be considered for detecting advanced threats. Next, I will present examples of using threat hunting searches to detect some techniques used by criminals. And finally, I will demonstrate the system live and justify why the threat hunting process is very important for your organizations. The concept of hunting threat can be summarized in 2 sentences. Threat hunting is an active search for adversaries without knowledge if they are in the organizations. And threat hunting look for threats that have not been detected by security systems. The goal of threat hunting is to limit the amount of damage done by threat actors by shortening the time from hacking to the detection, in which in the case of targeted attacks can be even many months. The threat hunting process should reduce the gap between protection failures and responses. So it's an additional validation that our systems haven't been compromised, even though our security system didn't detect anything. For example, if malware goes undetected for 6 months, the impact may be that thousands of credit card numbers are leaked. But if this time is longer, even greater losses may occur. There are several methods of threat hunting. One of them may be the identification of threats in the context of network zones in the organizations. For example, we can focus on analyzing north-south or east-west traffic, as well as critical assets. Another approach is creating hypotheses. For example, we can hypothesize that there has been a lot of sensitive data from the organization. Putting it this way, we look for traces of where something could have leaked and how. Threat intelligence is a knowledge about tactics, techniques, and procedures used by cybercriminals, which open our eyes to what can we expect from attackers. I will go into more detail about it in a moment. The more experience we have, the more ideas we have about and how to look for in the context of threats. More and more security monitoring systems have been examples of threat hunting searches. And of course, Psycop also provides such content. I will show you later. I would like to say a few more words about how to create threat intelligence in your organization. In the first step, we identified those threats that may cause huge losses for our organization. This is usually directly related to critical assets. When analyzing the criticality of resources, we must determine what we are currently protecting and whether appropriate threat detection mechanisms are working. In addition, of course, we should be aware of sectoral threats. For example, if we work in the financial sector, we must know its threat landscape. In the next step, we determine what motivation cybercriminals may have who want to attack us, as well as tactic techniques and procedures which are used by adversaries. Cybercriminals' motivations may vary: financial gain, theft of intellectual property, or hacktivism. A good source of knowledge about TTP used by cybercriminals is the Mitre attack database. We should be able to use acquired knowledge about adversaries in our security system. The use of proven of security feeds to detect threats is necessary for every organization, but it must be remembered that the feeds contain artifacts related to more widely known campaigns. So in the case of the targeted attacks, this method will not be effective. We need to remember about it. In order to gain knowledge about cybercriminals, we should monitor current threats, trends, cooperate with CERT, SOCs, read current news and analytical reports, and also verify the darknet for potential data leaks. As you know, in darknet we can find illegal tools such as exploit, illegal services such as DDoS, and of course stolen data, for example credit card numbers. Artifacts. Okay, the next step is of course to ensure that your own knowledge base about threats is knowledge about threats is updated. So we need to update our knowledge about our security threats, our incidents, traffic, our traffic characteristics, in order to be on the same page with all the security incident response team. Artifacts from previous incidents can be very useful when analyzing new threats. Combining external and internal knowledge about threats gives many possibilities in the context of security monitoring. From external threat intelligence, we receive information about new tactics and techniques used by cybercriminals and what should be protected. In turn, internal threat intelligence provides information about what we are currently protecting and how we have been attacked in the past. So it is added value, of course. All these activities are aimed at detecting threats more effectively and reacting to them faster. So this is the goal of threat hunting. To effectively hunt threats, we must first of all have access to appropriate data sources that we can analyze. As we can see, there are a lot of data sources. So today we will focus primarily on network data and especially on network flows, which are characterized by high speed of analysis because of as network metadata, they contain less information than packets. But on the other hand, it does not allow for deeper analysis of network communication. Flows are generated by network devices and contain a specific list of fields, information about IP addresses, ports, protocols, network interfaces, TCP flags, timestamps, as well as information about bytes and packets. Flows contain information about who is communicating, what service it concerns, what interfaces, when, what metrics accompanied this communication, as well as other additional fields obtained thanks to appropriate mappings and data enrichment. The main goal of all defenders, blue teams, is breaking the kill chain. But to do this effectively, you need to constantly deepen your knowledge of the methods used by criminals, of course. Such examples of threat detection based on network will be presented later in the presentation. Network visibility. There are many ways to represent network traffic in CyCOP. The ability to show the same data from different perspectives, for example, statistic, trend, and correlation charts, which can help detect not so obvious threats, often invisible from the point of view of other monitoring systems. A typical observation is one-to-many analysis, as you can see here, which may indicate a normal communications with a server, but it may also indicate security threats, such as, for example, spreading a malware. In this part of presentation, I will present specific examples related to the possibility of detecting threats thanks to NetFlow monitoring. I will use the CyCOP for this purpose, and all threat hunting searches will use MQL, which is the query language of the CyCOP system. Okay, so first let's look at the techniques used by one APT group. This group uses many techniques, but those that can be detected using NetFlow are marked in the screenshots. Here we see that that attackers use the edge SSH service, which works in reverse mode, traffic tunneling, dynamic DNS, and others. Examples of network level detection methods include SSH detection on non-standard ports with unknown devices, detection of large volumes of network traffic coming from management interfaces. And as we see, we can monitor some type of activity here. We can monitor SSH traffic in the context of inbound, outbound communication. So we can see, thanks to the macro, we can monitor traffic from internal to external in context of specific services. For example, in our case, in case of SSH traffic, using deep packet inspection to detect service, as well as using standard port. So we can monitor this activity in both directions, for example, from internal to external and from external to internal. And we need to know if this activity should be permitted in our organization. Here, example of such activity in our demo. Of course, we should also monitor using characteristic services on non-standard ports. So we see that application that SSH protocol uses is working on a port which is not 22. So such activity may indicate on may indicate on, for example, malicious activity. Yeah. Okay. So protocol tunneling. One of the most common services used for traffic tunneling is DNS. I will show you how simple it is. Just use the DNS cut tool on the attacker host by setting a password. In our case, it's test123. Then on the victim host, run the DNS cut client and establish connections to such a host as DNS communication. And when the session is established, we see we can run some commands. For example, we can upload, download the data. Of course, we can in this case we can exfilter some data from our organization. As we can see, such tunneling may contain a large number of TXT records. Yeah, so TXT records and long query names, which with an appropriate monitoring approach can be detected even using network flows. So please remember about these traffic characteristics, because therefore, in the context of DNS, you should pay attention to such issues as large number of DNS queries from one host, forbidden DNS servers, for example, OpenDNS, large DNS queries, DGA, specific characteristics related to TXT and NX domains, so specific records. So in Cycop you can find many security rules to detect such anomalies, as well as DNS traffic dashboards. The traffic dashboards. I will see more details about it during a demo. Dynamic resolution. Cybercriminals often use legitimate dynamic DNS services to host malicious payload or C2 in order to bypass an organization's firewall and other threats detection systems. This type of activity can be detected by looking for DNS queries from our organization to suspicious dynamic domains. As you see, we use this regex to detect specific known dynamic DNS services. Here I prepared Cycop queries to detect DNS by APT UNC 3524. But as we can see, there are many such organizations offering dynamic DNS. So the functionality that makes our lives easier and daily basis can also be used for maybe also used for malicious purposes. So legal service, but it may be used by administrator and hackers. So many adversaries use dynamic resolution techniques. So it is imperative that you monitor this activity in your organization. You have to do it because you see that threat actors very often use such services. Okay, do you remember the log4shell vulnerability? In the vulnerability, the log4j2 library connects to a remote LDAP LDAP server controlled by an attacker as a result of writing in the logs a specially crafted message. Yeah. And we won't see all of details in the all context of this attack monitoring on the NetFlow. But we can certainly analyze network traffic related to specific services, for example, LDAP. And now I will show you how to what should we monitor in context of the LDAP. Threat hunters consider to analyze anomalies related to this protocol. In our example, we see that we monitor LDAP traffic from external IP addresses. So all activity related to communications related to this protocol from external or internal should be monitored. And of course, you can exclude no services if you have to use it, because maybe your business allow for such activity if you have contracts with some business units. But please look at this because it may be very dangerous. Yeah, and here is an example of how you can create such query in Cyclops system. As I remember earlier, in Cyclops, you have to define which subnets are private, which subnets are which IP addresses belongs to specific functions. In our case, there is no LDAP subnet. So in our case, all activity in our system, in our demo, all traffic related to LDAP traffic from external to internal will be detected. Okay, some cybercriminals execute a command such as ping to test your internet connection, of course. Sometimes they do it regularly, sometimes they don't. So if we can clearly analyze data in the time ranges, you will certainly be able to detect some interesting network activities, specific characteristics of traffic. Yeah, so based on such analysis, I detected some interesting findings. For example, cryptocurrency mining. But it's not, of course, not obvious how to detect it. Okay, so proxy. ngrok is a legal reverse proxy tool that can help us to create a secure channel, secure tunnel, of course, to servers located behind firewalls or on local computers that do not have a public IP address. So ngrok has been used by cybercriminal groups in several campaigns, including lateral movement and data exfiltration. But you know that configuration such a service is very, very simple. Just run the ngrok HTTP command. And specify the directory for the data you want to share. After executing the command, we receive a URL and under which this data will be visible from the internet. So in the fact, after clicking on this link, we see we see shared data, and this way we can steal data from the organization. So it's very easy. So can we detect such technique? We can try to use regex function and analyze HTTP site HTTP hostname field. So here's an example from this activity. I downloaded some data from using this method, and we see that in Cycop I noticed such events. Okay, so in the credential access phase, the adversary may try to guess the password using tools such as Hydra. For example, we perform a brute force attacks in the context of the SSH service, and observing the characteristic of network traffic allows you to identify suspicious activities. As you see, we have what we did here. We create a query to identify service SSH. We created some metrics to calculate sessions bytes between two hosts, and based on such methods, we can identify characteristics communication between hosts, which may indicate on brute force, or as well as other techniques. Some time ago, I configured the Monero cryptocurrency miner to try to detect network traffic characteristics. As I mentioned earlier, observing quantitative data of parameters such as bytes, packets, flows would not necessarily allow me to identify the appropriate pattern for miners. Yeah, so it was not so easy. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, I detected that that it was regular connections to specific servers. But I noticed that a lot of network communication was taking place on specific ports. Yeah. In my case, there were quadruple 3 and quadruple 5. So to detect cryptocurrency mining, you can monitor specific ports. As you can see here, in Cycop, we have built-in content to detect such activity. You can see lookups with list of such ports which may be related to a crypto mining activity. And this is the second part of the list. And of course, we can also use a reputation IP address to detect such activity, as and this method is also very good. So you can very easy to detect such type of activity. Okay, so remote access software. Attackers often use remote access software during their attacks. So as threat hunters, we must be able to distinguish which of these activities are legal and which are not. I know that it's not so easy, but we need to create such policy in which way, in such a way that we can know what happened in our organization. So particularly popular tools used by cybercriminals are TeamViewer, VNC, or log me in. Yeah, but here is an example. Yeah, how services this remote access software uses specific ports or a specific host name. But as I mentioned, TeamViewer, log me in, VNC are very popular. So sometimes we can fold that somebody have a webinar or something like that, but or resolve some issues, but not. So we need to understand what is good and what is bad. Of course, it's not so easy, but we can try to do it. Analyzing of communications to or from suspicious ESNs should be part of the threat hunting process. We remember that we monitor NetFlow. In NetFlow, as a number is a standard field. Yeah, we we use it very often. Yeah, so you can find a list of suspicious ESN on many websites. For example, Spam House. Yeah, there is a list of suspicious ISN, and you can monitor traffic to this ISN from your organization. Maybe from somebody from your some host from your organization may be infected. Yeah, of course, you should also monitor country. Yeah, if your business is working in specific location, you can notice that traffic to from specific countries may be suspicious. In Cycle, there are fit categories such as, for example, malware, Tor, proxy, scanner, and many and other. Here you can see an example of query to detect communication with suspicious IP address and domains. Yeah, we see that we use such a condition as lookup key exists to detect communication, to detect if some IP addresses or some domains generated in our network were related to these databases, to these lookups. Yeah, so here's a list of CTI lists related to malware. Cybercriminals use encrypted traffic. Yeah, so yeah, you probably know that more traffic internet is encrypted. So what can we do? Because IPS are not able to analyze encrypted traffic. Sorry, not every system can monitor encrypted traffic. Not every organization uses IPS with encryption and something like that. But if we monitor only NetFlow, we are not able to decrypt traffic, yeah, because we don't have access to the packets. So what can we do? In this case, we can detect suspicious activity based by analysis TLS. So JI-free clients and JI-free servers. So this is fingerprints which allow you to detect suspicious encrypted traffic. Yeah. So let's move to the next example. Non-standard port. Monitoring suspicious ports should be one of the first tasks for threat hunters. MITRE ATT&CK provides information about the ports used by some adversaries. So I recommend to monitor these ports. Yeah. So if we see some strange ports in our traffic, we should look at it and analyze it. Data exfiltration is also possible via an ECMP protocol. Earlier, I showed you about example with DNS, but now I would like to tell you something about ECMP protocol. This is an example from the Atomic Red Team repository, but I encourage everyone to use this and other test methods to verify whether your security monitoring system are able to detect this type of activity. You can do it such test and see if your organization is able to detect such if your monitoring system are able to detect such type of activity. I recommend to do it. Of course, okay, the next case is related to exfiltration. It's very easy to exfiltrate data through web applications. Why? Because there are many websites which allows you. We can use cloud storages. We can use code repositories. So there are a lot of methods to do it, and monitoring such traffic should be part of your monitoring task, of course. I recommend to do it. Data transfer size limits. The next examples show that analyzing the volume of traffic in network communication allows you to detect interesting findings, such as sending a large number of bytes to unauthorized clouds. So these parameters related to the amount of data sent or received is very important in NetFlow monitoring. Yeah, so we need to remember that in context of NetFlow, we have information about bytes sent, bytes received. So correlations between these metrics and specific fields are added value. So which help you to detect specific issues and sometimes very critical threats. Okay, so the NetFlow protocol certainly allows you to detect access denial of service, for example, by monitoring metrics such as the number of sessions, the number of bytes, some packets, number of ESNs, number of countries. So here is an example of a correlation rule built in CyCop system, and you see that you can detect DDoS attacks, especially volumetric DDoS attacks. Built-in searches make it easier to detect network anomalies or security threats. I will show you about it later, but I encourage you to read this document to effectively use CyCop capabilities. If you use CyCop, I recommend to read it, and you will see a description for example of threat hunting searches. I hope it help you in your investigations. Okay, so now it's time for a demo. Just a second, I will show you a demo. Oh, just a second. Okay, can you see my screen? Magda, can you confirm? Okay, so analysis based on defined dashboards focus on standout indicators such as spikes, high values, high deviations, unusual combinations. Based on threat detections and analysis dashboard, we can analyze correlations between IP addresses. As you can see, these correlations between IP addresses, between groups, between countries. So you can focus on, you can analyze specific activity, specific type of traffic, because you can use many functions here. Okay, so of course we can analyze threats in the context of geolocation. Fast and effective analysis is possible thanks to the jumping between dashboards. Yeah, as you can see, we can click here, and the next point of the next very important function is filtering. Yeah, this function allows you to filtering data between and analysis and analyzes traffic in context of this filter. Yeah, CyCop alerts are matched with Attack Mitre knowledge base. With Attack Mitre knowledge base, making standard it easier. Yeah, so for example, we can see such statistics here. For example, in view for managers, Yeah. So the SOC and KPI dashboard is useful for managers because it shows trends and statistics for detected anomalies and security threats. Psychop alerts, as I mentioned earlier, are matches with MITRE knowledge base. Yeah, so making standards alert easy to understand. Yeah, filtering and tactics, filtering by tactics and techniques in the system is possible in almost all security views. So every analyst should understand what alert means. Here is an example of filtering. Um, Filtering is the ability to create custom searches. Yeah, these filters help us in threat hunting, and we have some built-in threat hunting searches. For example, we can monitor traffic in context external threats. We can monitor traffic in context internal threats. Uh, internal threats, and as you can see, we have a lot of much more queries which can be used to your investigation. Um, Analysis from alerts table. I will show you how to analyze from alerts table. Okay, I will remove the query. Another analysis maybe do you can do it here. For example, we can handle alerts. We can mark alert. We can set the flags, for example, mark as acknowledge, mark as new, mark as false positive. Of course, we can also see details of the alert, what happened in context of this alert, what the alert means. Yeah, if you need, we can investigate the issue, the detected issue, from using other tools. For example, we can run script to analyze reportations of marked IP address. Yeah, so there are a lot of possibilities in context of incident handling system. In context of incident handling for your organization, for your team. So it's a great tool if you want to, if you don't use any incident handling monitoring. Of course, you can send the alerts to another system, for example, to CM, and then monitor detected alerts in the CM system and correlate alerts detected by other system as well. Yeah, so it's also added value. Yeah, but of course you can use monitoring. You can monitor NetFlow here and detect some anomalies and threats. I mentioned earlier that some specific type of dashboard is related to DNS traffic analysis. Yeah, so you can, based on this group of dashboards, you can look into DNS protocol for many perspectives. You can analyze in context of course query types. You can see statistics. You can see some trends of traffic. So, for example, you can see that something is maybe interesting here. Yeah, so monitoring analysis or DNS is very important for every organizations. So it's you must do it. You have to do it because it's very important. Okay, so what are benefits of NetFlow monitoring? NetFlow monitoring increases the visibility of network traffic and supports the task of administering IT network, of course. So this is the basic function. of course, supports the network performance process with appropriate metrics, as well as security processes. And based on MITRE attack knowledge base, we see that there is a lot of techniques that can be detected based on NetFlow. So this is the case why I recommend to monitor NetFlow. If you didn't start yet, you should do it. Okay, so but what are benefits of threat hunting process? What do you think? You can improve your security in your organizations. You will be an expert in log analysis or in NetFlow analysis, yeah, because you analyze it very precise. You will better understand your network traffic, yeah. So you understand what happened in your network ad hoc, quick, fast. And you will improve your knowledge about risk and security threats, because during your investigation you will detect some policies issues, some maybe threat issues, and many other technical issues. Yeah, so it should be improved by your IT team. The purpose of this presentation was to provide an introduction to threat hunting process, yeah, using simple examples. In my presentation, there were very simple examples. Expect some more advanced examples in the next webinar. Here is useful links you can use. You can read more about threat hunting and some threats using these links. And now we can move to the Q&A session. Sorry, it will be quiz now, yeah? So Magda, you can start the quiz. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Feel free to okay. So there are two simple questions. You can win very nice prizes. I mentioned about what does TTP means, because I use this word especially many times during my presentation. So okay, I see that it was questions that the system works based on defined rules. As it's possible to create custom rule to detect something specific for our network? Yeah, it's very easy. It's very easy to create some rules. If you, for example, how to create rules. Okay, we have to go to the rule tab, and now we can create a rule from template. As you can see, there are a lot of rules in our system. Rules related to exfiltration, rules related to discovery, impact, command and control, reconnaissance, and many others tactics, and how to enable the rule. It's enough. You can click here. You can choose the rule, and then you can click create, and of course, if you want, you can change some settings. But if you click create, your rule will be enabled. But if you want, you can create a rule from the beginning. Okay, sorry, you didn't see my screen. Just a second. It's strange because do you see my screen now? So again, if you want to use a built-in rule, you click to Rules tab. Next, you have to click rule from scratch. Rule from template, and you can see a list of built-in rules. There are many rules from exfiltration, discovery, impact, reconnaissance, and C2 and initial access. So from many tactics. And if we choose some rules, for example, this one, we can check settings default settings of thresholds. If everything is okay, we click create, and now the rule was enabled. But of course, you can create a rule from scratch, so from beginning. So you should you should create stream, for example. You can use many streams, many aggregation streams, for example, and configure categories, configure actions, thresholds, and privacy. So if you have knowledge how to create the rule, you can do it alone. If you don't have knowledge about monitoring, you should use custom. You can use our templates as well. You can use searches, our searches, building searches, and which help you to detect specific traffic. Yeah, so I hope that this content allow you to detect activities which may be not so obvious in to detect in another monitoring systems. Yeah, so I recommend to use this system to monitoring. So every SOC should use such system, in my opinion. Okay, so are there any other questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, I think we can finish. So thank you for your attention. See you next webinar. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would like to add something to, to my presentation. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye bye.